Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses. This is show number 235. It's Sunday, the 1st of May, and this is actually a recording because I am out on the bike doing some training today. It was a lovely day yesterday. Hopefully, today won't be too bad, but we can only hope. What have I got for you today, though? Well, we'll be looking at how the motorcycle anti-tampering rules that threatened to prevent customization will not be retrospective, but it's not entirely clear what they will do when they apply to new motorcycles. The UK bill that has overturned an EU ruling would mean that there is no need for compulsory third-party insurance on off-road bike sport. The MCIA welcomes government plans to legalise private e-step scooters. Is Yamaha about to launch an 890 Tenere triple? The Elite Rider Hub promises access to better biking content and training, whilst BikeSafe offers a raft of benefits to go with their courses. And finally, an inquest has been told that a police motorcyclist killed in a collision was too quick. So settle yourselves down for the next 30 minutes or so. You're with Kevin Williams here of Survival Skills Rider Training. Don't forget, if you have anything that you want to ask, I can't respond to you today because I'm not live, but I will get back to you if you put something in the comment stream. So anything you've got to say, I'll get back to you when I'm back from my day out on the bike today. Right, okay, so first things, a couple of apologies for the lack of a show on Wednesday. I'm afraid I was up in the Peak District training. I'd hoped to get something recorded, and I was just too busy, I'm afraid. I just ran out of time. And the second thing that I need to apologise for is that this show was planned to be a special with CE clothing standards expert Paul Varnsverry, as he cast his eye over two pairs of typical bike boots and gave us the benefits of his knowledge while I dismantled one of those pairs, what to look for and what to avoid when parting with cash. But unfortunately, again, due to pressure of work, it's been manic the last couple of weeks. I simply haven't had time to sit down and edit the interview into a usable format. So I do plan to get that done early next week. So if you're waiting to see it, hopefully it'll go out as part of the Wednesday show on the 4th of May. And also that evening, it's time for May's online talk event, which will be covering overtaking. As I say, making it out the other side. Overtaking is one of those activities that we tend to take for granted when we're riding a motorcycle, but it actually leads to a large number of open road fatalities, much more so than the crash that most riders fear, which is the junction collision. So I'll be trying to offer you some insights based on my experience as a courier, what I've learned as an instructor, and the idea is to give you some sound advice to keep you out of trouble when you're overtaking. And not least, I will be explaining why sometimes it's a better idea not to try to make progress. Right, anyway, on with today's news. After a parliamentary debate on anti-tampering measures that could affect motorcycles, both the National Motorcyclists Council and the Motorcycle Action Group, which recently pulled out of the NMC, of course, they're both claiming the positive noises are partly at least a result of their lobbying. Now, the debate was in response to a consultation paper entitled The Future of Transport Regulatory Review, Modernising Vehicle Standards, and that appeared last year, and it was instantly dubbed a recipe for the death of motorcycling, with something we've heard many times, of course, in the past. But it was, in this case, it was because the paper included a raft of anti-tampering measures, and they were sort of instantly interpreted as meaning no customization of motorcycles, and that so no modifications to a motorcycle at all would be allowed. And the paper also covered the marketing, promotion, and sale of tampering services or products, and said that they would also be outlawed. Now, not too surprisingly, the result was widespread media attention, and there was a petition put forward to reverse the proposals, and it gained more than 115,000 signatures, and that made it eligible for a parliamentary debate. And that duly happened on Monday, April 25th. And several members during that debate spoke against the proposals, citing concerns about damage of these wide-ranging anti-tampering regulations, the damage that could do to the classic vehicle sector, as well as motor and motorcycle sports, and of course the aftermarket parts, accessories and customization sector. On the other hand, other members spoke about the social nuisance caused by modified exhausts, but it was pointed out that these are issues that are actually covered by current regulations and that they could in fact be enforced. So the argument there was that new legislation is not necessary. Transport Minister Trudy Harrison, MP, said that 7,891 people had actually responded to the consultation itself and confirmed that the government would be announcing further plans during the summer. And it's still said to be considering its approach to any new laws. But she did say that the government's plans should protect a healthy aftermarket sector and protect motorsports and heritage vehicles. And she also stated that any new regulations will not be retrospective, and that the new measures would target health and safety and would be particularly aimed at tampering with the advanced and autonomous driving systems, which are coming on newer vehicles, of course, and also modifications that would increase emissions from new and future generations of vehicles. So that could include intake, ECU, tuning, and obviously exhaust systems. There's a long way to go between the parliamentary debate and the drafting of the new legislation, but since the EU have also been looking at ways of locking down some of the restricted motorcycles and scooters and their drivetrains, their power output, that kind of thing, I would expect that the UK will probably be waiting to see what happens in Europe, seeing as we have a common market for motor vehicles and parts. So don't forget, if you want to catch this show live, when it does go out live, it's Wednesdays and Sundays at 11. Today is a recording, although it is going out at 11. And if you can't get it here, you can catch up always on Facebook after the event or on my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK, where all the shows are available to watch, all 350 plus of them. So it's a pretty political heavy raft of stories for you today. So another political story involves the proposed extension of compulsory third-party motor insurance to cover motor and motorcycle sports which take place away from the public highway. Now, this followed a judgment by the European Court of Justice back in 2014. What happened was that there was a personal injury claim resulting from an accident involving a trailer on private agricultural property in Slovenia. And because the lack of insurance, the judgment sought to extend compulsory third-party motor insurance to all mechanically propelled vehicles used on land, which would have included everything from powered children's cars and bikes, through ride-on lawnmowers and golf buggies, right up to MotoGP bikes. So specifically, any motorcycles used in competition would have needed third-party liability insurance, and it was very quickly realised that that was simply uninsurable. So what happened was that sporting bodies such as the UK's Auto Cycle Union, the ACU, which oversees motorcycle sport in this country, and the FIM, which do the same for motorcycling on the world stage, they began lobbying for a reversal of this judgment. And the decision has been in limbo for some 8 years until the EU recently amended European law to grant member states the choice to remove this provision for compulsory third-party insurance for vehicles used for closed circuit sport. Precisely where that leaves your lawnmower, I don't know. But anyway, thanks to Brexit, a separate step was now needed to amend the EU law, which had passed into UK law, but then been separated again via Brexit. And so a private member's bill put forward by Peter Bone MP and supported by the government has duly done that. So that's good news for motorcycle sport in this country. Meanwhile, the MCIA, Motorcycle Industry Association, clearly sensing a business opportunity for their dealer members, has welcomed the Transport Secretary's rather surprising comments that the government is now looking to legalise the private use of e-step scooters. So that's what I've been calling e-scooters. We're now trying to define those away from sort of moped-type scooters. So e-step scooters, the government is looking to legalise their use, and as part of a raft of legislation that will be announced via the Queen's speech. But the organisation also says that whilst these e-step scooters have value for certain journeys, they aren't appropriate in all settings, and the association will be pushing to ensure any new legislation does not negatively impact on the lower end of the L category sector. So that's basically mopeds. Interestingly, the association is also suggesting that legislation should make necessary provisions for rider training, for licensing, for road insurance, and for the use of personal protective equipment, presumably compulsory helmet wear, all of which, of course, would probably benefit the motorcycle industry's members. Tony Campbell, who's the CEO of the MCIA, said, "We cannot afford for legislation to be configured in such a way that doesn't ensure robust safety and training requirements for private e-step scooters. Equally, we cannot afford for existing vehicle categories such as electric mopeds and small motorcycles and the opportunities they already represent to be overlooked any further. With the electric moped market growing exponentially each year, small changes to current legislation would allow easier market access and lower vehicle costs, creating a new sector that for private use would be just as safe and easier to regulate than privately owned e-step scooters. E-step scooters and L category vehicles all have a role to play in the zero emission future, which is why the right regulation for the right vehicle approach is critical to the success of government's urban mobility and decarbonisation ambitions." Now, I happen to have a study actually of injuries involving this e-step scooter style of PTW, powered two-wheeler, and I will discuss that on a future show. Meanwhile, it occurs to me that the companies who've picked up the costs of the trials of rental scooters can't be entirely happy to hear that their business model is about to be cut from under by allowing private ownership. But I have to say there's also an element here of propping the stable door open long after the horse kicked it down. There are so many private e-step scooters on the roads now, rattling around. Getting them off the roads is going to be next to impossible. So the only real solution is actually to go for legalization. Right. Don't forget, if you do enjoy the show, you can pop over to my coffee page. A small contribution over there buys me a cuppa and buys you access to 800 odd articles on better biking for a month. Become a subscriber and you get access for as long as you subscribe, plus access to a range of extra, more in-depth content. So probably the biggest resource for any riders anywhere in the UK. Now, with a dearth of new bikes appearing, the rumour mill is working overtime to keep riders interested, and a French magazine called Moto Station is suggesting that the Yamaha are currently in the final stages of development of a new Tenere model based around the very successful 890 CP3 engine. Whoops, that's the wrong picture. Let me just shift that one on. That was the one that was supposed to go with my talk advert for the overtaking talk. So there is the picture that I suspect it's a render rather than anything real, but that's what Moto Station is suggesting the CP3 based Tenere could look like. Now, this bike would make sense in several ways, really. The Tracer, very successful motorcycle, really is a sort of it's called an adventure sport, but it's really a tourer. So the 900 triple here would go in a much more off-road oriented setup, and it would make, as I say, the 900 motor has been particularly successful ever since it first appeared in the MT09 and then into the various tracer derivatives, and adding a big brother to the existing Tenere 700 model would also make sense, since the XTZ 1200Z Super Tenere was discontinued recently. So the model would compete pretty much head on with bikes like the Triumph Tiger 900, Ducati Desert X, and that new MV Agusta Lucky Explorer, which I showed a few months back. But the Tenere does have a bit of a reputation for being slightly sharper off-roader, from what I gather. Right, now, I was just talking about the resources that I have created for you, which you can find over on my Ko-fi page. But several decades after launching the post-test rider improvement scheme, the Edge, I was actually one of the original approved instructors for that scheme, but sadly it flopped spectacularly back in the late 90s. The MCIA are dipping a toe back into the rider training market with a scheme called Elite Rider Program. It's said to have been created by the MCIA, road safety and training experts, government departments, and respected associated organisations. So very predictably, it's the very first I've heard of it. So consultation certainly hasn't been spread that far and wide. Now, the aims are the usual ones: to increase the number of riders who are undertaking post-test rider training, and to motivate riders to consider other road users and the environment as they ride. The scheme appears to be based around a website, the Elite Rider Hub, where it said you'll be able to find a wealth of information and support to improve your skills. You get information, it says, and contact details of nationally available post-test rider training schemes. So it obviously won't give you details for people like me or other independents, which I always think is a bit of a skewed playing field. Certainly do get links to book training, so it will take you to places like ROSPA, the IAM, the Diamond scheme, presumably the ERS, and presumably BikeSafe too. But frankly, it doesn't really seem to be saying anything new. Excuse me for being a bit skeptical about that one. Meanwhile, on the skills theme, as I continue on that one, I've just received the latest email from BikeSafe, which will also presumably be on the hub. And that tells me that the courses are about being skilled, about being safe, and about keeping it on the black stuff. But they're now offering some useful discounts too. And it goes on to tell you that should you book a BikeSafe workshop online, you can now get 10% off Devitt's motorcycle insurance policies, 10% off Ultimate custom motorcycle earplugs, 10% off Infinity motorcycles, their bike clothing and kit, 20% off air vests from well, I think it is called AirVest to the company. 25% off data tag. That's probably the one that I'd be most interested in, I have to say. And 10% off ROSPA advanced motorcycle and car tests. And just in case you haven't got a copy already, you get 30% off the DVSA's own publications, including the Police Riders Handbook Roadcraft. Now, on to the final piece for today. Some bad news. Again, looking at my news feed, it's full of news of motorcycle crashes, and there are more calls for riders to be particularly careful over the spring bank holiday, which of course is tomorrow. And for car drivers also to watch out for motorcycles. But the final story actually involves a fatal accident involving a police motorcyclist. And rather sadly, the police collision investigator working on the case, he told the inquest that the police motorcyclist who died after this crash was riding too quick. It seems that PC Matt Lenny of South Yorkshire Police was actually riding at 84 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone when he collided with a car in Nether Lane in Ecclesfield on the 21st of April last year. Now, he was on an emergency call. He was responding to requests for help from colleagues who'd stopped a car nearby, which had then made off. Now, PC Lanny apparently rode his motorcycle towards the incident using his blue lights, but without his sirens on. And he rode over the brow of a hill and into the 30-mile-per-hour zone. Now, the circumstances were described by collision investigator PC Rob Sawyers, and he told the court how at the same time a car driver, one John Harrison, was turning right into the Provincial Park industrial area, which took him across the path of the oncoming motorcycle. Now, Mr. Harrison told the court that he never saw the bike, but noticed a yellow blur partway through his turn just before his windscreen shattered. PC Sawyers, the accident investigator, said he didn't think the 40-year-old officer would have had time to properly assess risk as he rode over the crest, giving Mr. Harrison just a few seconds to see his bike. The coroner concluded that speed had been a major factor in the collision and that Mr. Harrison had insufficient time to recognise the bike, work out the speed, and then decide on a course of action before the collision. And PC Sawyers, he said, when you respond to an incident as a police driver, it doesn't come without responsibility. From my perspective, PC Lanny has perhaps been riding too quick to risk assess what is happening in front of him. And the coroner said that he felt the speed and the topography meant that neither driver could have avoided the collision. And he said the speed of the motorcycle was a major factor in this crash. But he did say that that had to be balanced against the fact that PC Lanny was reasonably responding to a serious incident. Now, just to round off, really, it's difficult to comment on an incident like this without actually seeming to apply hindsight. But all I can say to this is that, even police riders can't beat the laws of physics. And here are two things that we absolutely have to consider when thinking about whether or not to ride more quickly. If you double your speed, you effectively quadruple your stopping distance. That's the way the physics works. So double your speed and your stopping distance is 4 times longer. So think about how that works. At 30, a reasonably competent motorcyclist on a sort of with a reasonably decent brakes on just a pretty standard surface should be able to stop in 10 or 12 meters from 30 miles an hour. It really doesn't take that much effort to do that. But if you ride at 60 miles per hour, you're going to need closer to 50 meters to come to a standstill. That is the effect of quadrupling your stopping distance. Now, the second thing that you need to take into account is how quickly we lose speed. And here's the problem. The graph, if you draw a graph of the dropping in speed, it's not a straight line. It doesn't do a straight line. What it actually does is relatively little happens to start with, and then suddenly the speed all drops off at the end. So in 3/4 of our stopping distance, we lose just 1/4 of our speed. 3/4 of the distance that we travel before we stop, we have only slowed down by about 25%. So that's when our braking force is the same all the way through. So the minute we start adding extra speed, if we can't actually stop, we actually hit things surprisingly hard. So if you imagine 2 bikes traveling side by side, one traveling at 30, one traveling at 40, and they both brake for an obstacle at exactly the same moment. If the rider doing 30 miles an hour can just stop before impacting the whatever the object is, but probably a car we're talking about here, pulling out across the path of the rider. If the rider at 30 can just stop, the rider traveling at 40 will hit that car at around 25 miles per hour. Not 10 miles per hour, as we might intuitively think, at 25 miles per hour. And 25 miles per hour is enough to cause serious injuries, possibly fatal injuries. So think about how you ride in urban areas, even in rural areas, and how you add speed. And more importantly, ask yourself, where should I be taking some speed away? Right, so as I said, it's a pretty short show today, but I hope you have enjoyed it. I shall be back with the Boots special on Wednesday. I shall be putting that show together in the next couple of days when I have a little bit of time in hand to do that. So I hope to see you then. Don't forget the next webinar live online event is the overtaking one, and that's on Wednesday in the evening at 8 p.m. Tickets are still available for that. They cost a mere £5, and you'll get some potentially life-saving information. So enjoy your day out on the bike today if you're going out later, and make sure you stay shiny side up. Thanks for watching. You've been watching Kevin Williams here of Survival Skills Rider Training, and hopefully catch you on Wednesday.